This time on GeekPod Blue.
Warning, station is now code blue.
Hello and welcome to Day 2 of GeekPod Blue's 12 Days of Christmas. I hope you guys are looking forward to this because we've got a very interesting story today, and we're going to be continuing with our history of Santa Claus. Now, I was not aware of this because my knowledge of Santa Claus pretty much comes from those Bass Rankin specials. I thought he was a little man made of wood that talked to puppets and a Burgermeister named Meisterburger. But it turns out that he was a real person, as we learned last episode. But apparently, much like Doctor Who, he also has companions that travel with him. Now, I don't think that his sleigh exactly counts as a TARDIS, but I think that these companions certainly paint an interesting picture of how scary the world used to be. Years ago, you'd have something good, but then you'd have something equally as bad, as its opposite. So, whereas now we try to, be nice to kids and, try to nurture them and usher their growth. Back then it was like, hey, be good and good stuff happens. Be bad and you'll die. Pretty much is how it worked. Now, the companions of St. Nicholas are a group of very closely related figures who apparently would travel with him throughout territories in the Holy Roman Empire. Now, they act as an antithesis to the benevolent Christmas jolly elf, I guess, and they would threaten to hurt disobedient children. They would do awful, awful things, whereas, if the kids were good, they would get toys and candy. If they were bad, Santa's companions would fuck their shit up. Now, one of these we're just going to touch on. Everybody knows who Krampus is, and we're going to talk about Krampus in another episode because there is definitely enough material there for Krampus to have his own little podlet, as it were. Now, the first one of these we're going to talk about is Knecht Ruprecht. Now, in the folklore of Germany, Knecht Ruprecht, which translates as farmhand Rupert or servant Rupert, is a friend of St. Nicholas, and he's one of the most familiar, at least in Germany. I think here in the U.S., Krampus is more familiar due to the fact of numerous TV appearances and movies. But in Germany, Knecht Ruprecht is the most traditional and the most known. Now, tradition holds that he appears in appears in homes on Christmas Eve, and he's a man with a long beard, and he has a fur or covered suit, and sometimes he carries a long staff and a bag of ashes, and he wears little bells on his toes. Now, according to those said traditions, Ruprecht will ask children whether they know their prayers. And if they do know their prayers, they receive apples and nuts and gingerbread and all sorts of other little nifty old world gifts. If they don't, he beats the children with his bag of ashes. Now, I don't know if a bag of ashes would hurt. I mean, this might be the old world equivalent of a sock full of quarters. I don't know. In more modern versions of the story, he will give them naughty gifts like lumps of coal and sticks and stones. Whereas the well-behaving kids would get sweets from Santa Claus. Now, he's also been known to give naughty children a stick in their shoes instead of candy and such like that in German tradition. Ruprecht was also a common name for the devil in Germany. And Grimm from the Brothers Grimm states, Robin Fellow is the same home sprite whom we in Germany call Knecht Ruprecht and exhibit to children at Christmas. And he first appears in written sources in the 17th century as a figure in the Nuremberg Christmas procession. Now, it's interesting to know, as the first one of these we talk about, it's pretty bad. This guy is the anti-Claus, so to speak. Apparently he walks with a limp because of a childhood injury, and his clothes and face are generally dirty because he gets covered in soot when he goes down chimneys to, rape and destroy your children. Sometimes the children would be summoned to the door to perform tricks like dance and sing to impress Santa and Ruprecht, just to prove that they were good kids. And those who performed badly would be beaten soundly by Ruprecht. Now, That's kind of like some American Idol shit right there. I mean, teaching your kids, you better sing and dance perfectly or you're going to get the shit kicked out of you on Christmas. That would scare the crap into me, out of me, just to be good, I gotta say. In other versions, finally, the kids would be tossed into a river. Into a river. Be good, kids, or you'll be tossed into a river. I mean, that's some seriously messed up shit right there. Moving on to the next companion. The next companion of Santa Claus is named Belsnickel, and no, that is not the name of a foreign candy bar. It is the name of a man wearing furs which cover his entire body, and sometimes he wears a mask with a long tongue, and he's a kind of a scary creature. He visits children at Christmas time and delivers socks and shoes full of candy. But if they were not good, they'll find coals or sticks or switches in their stockings instead. Now, this particular myth actually made its way to the U.S., oddly enough. In parts of the United States in the 19th century, Pelsnickel traditions were maintained for a while among immigrants as far west as Indiana, and still in Pennsylvania, where he's known as Belsnickel. Now, a first-hand 19th century account of the Belsnickel tradition in Maryland can be found in a collection of essays written by a man named Jacob Brown in 1824. And he says, we did not hear of Santa Claus. We were visited by a different character altogether. He was known as Kriskinkle Belsnickel and sometimes as the Xmas Woman, which is a very strange way to put things. Children then not only saw the mysterious person, but felt him, or rather his stripes upon their backs with his switch. The annual visitor would make his appearance sometimes hours after dark, though disguised, especially in the face, which would sometimes be covered with a hideously ugly fizz. I don't know what a fizz is. Apparently here it says it's generally a female garb. Sometimes it would be a very large woman with masculine shoulders and force. She would be equipped with a sack around the shoulders filled with cakes, nuts, and fruits, and a long hazel switch, which was supposed to have some charm as well as sting. So there's your BDSM right there. And they were scattered the goodies upon the floor and scramble, to have the children begin to pick them up. But they would hit the kids who were excited with the switch. They'd hit them in the back while they were grabbing the candy. So, I mean, that's seriously BDSM stuff. This was apparently prominent in Maryland, in Pennsylvania, amongst the Pennsylvania Dutch as well. That was a pretty big deal. Now, we were talking about throwing kids in rivers. Now we're talking about, hey kids, I'm going to throw this candy on the ground, and when you go to grab it, I'm going to beat you while you're grabbing it. I gotta say, this is some seriously messed up stuff, but, I mean, that's what tradition, family, and religion can do to a person. Finally, we're going to talk about Black Pete, or Zwarte Pete. He is the third companion of Santa Claus, and there's not as much about him. His Wikipedia is pretty much a stub rather than a long article. But basically, the character first appeared in his current form in an 1850 book by someone by the name of Jan Shankman, and is commonly depicted as a blackamoor. Traditionally, Zwarte Pete is said to be black because he is a Moor from Spain. Now, people who portray him typically wear blackface makeup, which we know is awful. And basically, he just hangs around with Santa. He's not as bad. He is kind of like comic relief, making jokes and doing silly things. He's certainly not beating on the kids. I've got to say that it's certainly nice that somebody came up with some traditions that weren't about beating children, because, I mean, that's kind of fucked up. But that is going to cover the companions of Santa Claus. Tomorrow, I think we're going to talk about the one that everybody really wants to hear about, which is Krampus. But I hope to see you guys tomorrow. And just like clockwork, there's my phone. Hold on just a moment.
Text from Paul, text from Paul, everybody loves to get text from Paul. Text from Paul, text from Paul, everybody loves to get text from Paul. Show wins.
And Paul says, on the second day of Christmas, my Hugh friend gave to me 2 comic books I don't have time to read. Seems about right.
Text from Paul, text from Paul, everybody loves to get text from Paul. Text from Paul, text from Paul, everybody loves to get text from Paul. Show wins.
Now, I am glad that Paul interrupted me there, because I almost forgot one figure that I wanted to add to the companions of Santa Claus. Now, this isn't actually someone who is said to travel with him, but it's kind of a variation which is spoken of in some of the same texts, and I just thought it was an interesting spin on the Santa Claus myth. Now, Joulupukki, I don't know how to pronounce this. Joulupukki is a Finnish Christmas figure. The name Joulupukki, Pookie, that sounds so awful, or dirty, or just cute, I'm not sure, literally means Christmas goat or Yule goat. Apparently the word Pookie comes from the Teutonic root bok, which is a cognate of the English buck, and means billy goat. So, this is an old Scandinavian custom, and the figure eventually became pretty much a Santa Claus in Finland, or at least related to. Now, the Joulupukki is a pagan tradition, and we will touch on pagan traditions at another point during these 12 days. And it's connected to Norse mythology. He's said to wear a tight red leather pants and a tight fur-trimmed red leather coat. That sounds like a party in San Francisco rather than a holiday tradition. But apparently, he was a man turned into a goat man on Christmas Eve. Now, in Finland, there are a lot of people who still dress up in a goat costume and perform in return for leftover food after Christmas. So, as a Christmas tradition, I just want to frame this for you. People in Finland will put on red leathers and go perform acts of some sort for leftover food. I mean, it's all right if that's your idea, you know. I mean, here we sing Christmas carols. Apparently, such that the person who does that is usually an older man, and tradition they refer to them as a nutipukki or nutty pookie. It actually looks like nut. So I can certainly understand that, you know, performing for leftovers, I would say you've got to be pretty nutty. Now, just so you guys know, most of these words have little squiggly things over them, so I'm probably pronouncing a lot of this stuff wrong. So please, if you do know exactly how it's supposed to be pronounced, feel free to, you know, yell at me for not knowing Swedish. Now, apparently, Joulupukki and his wife live and work in a place called Korventuntri in Lapland. His assistants are called Tantu, and they're not elves, but they're basically small humans. They dress the same as Joulupukki in the tight red leathers, and the males also have a white beard. They're smaller in size, but can be of any age and gender, and a lot of people like to dress up as those as well. Now, pagans also have a festivity to honor the return of the sun and believe that Joulupukki is the earliest form of the present-day Santa and part of that celebration. The Yule goat was thought to be an ugly creature and frighten children, while others believe it was an invisible creature that would help them prepare for the holidays. A lot of people theorize when Christianity began incorporating pagan ways into their festivals in order to justify their actions, like at the Council of Nicaea mentioned last time, they merged the pagan figure with an already known existing Catholic legend known as Santa Claus or St. Nicholas to create Santa Claus. So the idea is that they may have taken the pagan Joulupukki and kind of slash him with St. Nicholas to create our modern day Santa Claus so they could better control the masses. Because really, I mean, Santa is more of a modern creation. There were popular radio programs from 1927 on, including all of the jingles and everything written, that had a huge influence on reformatting the concept of Santa. Santa was traditionally part of historical and cultural traditions and took different forms. It wasn't until the late 1920s that advertising executives got their hands on the concept and turned it into the marketing behemoth that Santa Claus is today. If you think that, for all time, it's always been about Santa Claus and his reindeer and jolly sleigh, a lot of that stuff is just creations of our marketing executives to sell more shit at Christmas. And that's fine. I don't care about that, because you know what? We all get together, give each other cool shit, and have a lot of fun. That's going to wrap things up this time. I will see you guys tomorrow when we are finally going to talk about the evil, evil Krampus. Till then, tuck and roll, kids.
GeekPod Blue is a GeekPod Network production. Executive producers Paul Showens and Hugh Allen. Concept created by Paul Showens and Hugh Allen. Intro is Opportunity by Jamus Breed. Closing is Bucket by Jamus Breed. Both licensed for use by Dennis Johnston. Want to help the show? Leave a 5-star rating on iTunes. GeekPod can be reached at contribute@geekpod.com or send us a tweet at GeekPod. That's G33kpod. You can also find GeekPod on Facebook and Instagram. G33kpod. That's G33kpod.